Hi, it's Rob from the Brush and Boltgun. Today's tutorial is going to be doing the second part to the Sordane Publishing Cyclops, so I'll get all the links and stuff in the thing below. Without further ado, we shall get the painting started. The first colour we were going to use is Citadel Bugman's Glow, which has decided to go rock hard and not be usable anymore. Don't know if anyone else suffers with the same thing with the pots, where a little lip forms on the inside, doesn't let it shut properly, and then you can't get the lid to close. You have to trim a little bit of the lid off with a craft knife or something. So we're going to use Vallejo Flesh base instead. I'm going to do all of his skin with that colour. Next we're going to use a little bit of Citadel Dryad Bark. I'm going to use this to do the shells on his shoulder and also the wooden bits on the handles for his weapons there. Next is Vallejo Black. I'm going to use this to do the kind of leather straps over his shoulders, the loincloth kind of bit, a few other little sections on him, nothing too major. Loincloth stretches through to the back there as well, so there's a bit hanging down over his butt as well. You can also use like Citadel Black Templar, like the contrast, instead of using actual black paint. I think the contrast, I remembered afterwards, is actually a lot easier to use than the paint because it flows a lot better. So you can use that if you want to as well. Next one is Citadel Rakarth Flesh. I'm going to use this to do the wraps around his legs, the kind of bone on the spear as well. I'm going to do that as though he's got like a wooden wrap around the handle, and then bone for the blade on the kind of side thing as well as the spear. You also got those little spikes coming off the shells on his arm, so plenty of stuff to do with the Rakarth Flesh there. Next is Citadel Karak Stone. I'm going to use this to do any of the leathery bits that I'd like to use contrast on. He's got these little kind of leather booty things on his feet. You've got the straps for his pads, some of the straps around his body, his belt, that kind of thing. So give him a nice dose of Karak Stone. I'd usually use Baneblade Brown, but again, Baneblade Brown has taken the knock and joined the ranks of the rock hard paints. Next is Citadel Xerius Purple. I'm going to use this to do his trousers. Give them a nice deep purple colour. Next is Citadel Jokero Orange, or Jokero, or however you want to pronounce it. I'm sure someone will correct me in the comments. We're going to use that to do his hair, so you can have a nice orange mohawk there. Very neatly trimmed giant, so obviously he's got a decent barber for the size of his head. Probably cost him a fortune. Next up, we're going to use a little bit of Citadel Macragge Blue, which is a lovely blue, I think. We're going to use that to do his top. Give that a nice smooth coat of that. If you're wondering why he sprayed the sort of like Space Wolf Grey, I ran out of black spray paint to undercoat with, so I just used what I had, which was the, I think, Colour Forge Wolfkin or something like that. It's whatever the equivalent is of the Fang anyway, but it's a good spray. Next we're going to use a little bit of Citadel Iron Warriors. I would usually use Citadel Lead Belcher, but the Lead Belcher has gone Walkies. So the Iron Warriors it is, and it looks pretty much the same to my eyes anyway. Can't really tell a difference of it, but there we go. Works just as well, gives a good coating on those little metal bits. Next, we're going to use some Citadel Hobgrot hide, which is a nice kind of orangey colour. Going to use that for the ropes. You can use, I think it's Tallarn Sand as well, something along those lines. Any colour along that kind of shade and colour is pretty decent to use for ropes. Next is Citadel Rakarth Flesh shade, the shade. I'm going to use this to do all of his skin. This gives it a nice shade in all of those creases and folds. And then when we come to recolour that, that'll allow those details to show up a lot better. Stops the colour being quite so flat. Next shade is going to be Citadel Athonian Camo shade. I'm going to use this to do the tortoise shell on his shoulder there. The reason for this is I'm going to be doing it like a little bit patterned, nothing too fancy. Just a couple of those yellow lines that you get on like terrapin shells, like the red-eared sliders. And they always have that kind of green tinge to the brown shell, so I'm going to use a bit of Athonian Camo shade to kind of give that green colour, or a hint of green on it. Next one is going to be Citadel Agrax Earth shade, one of my favourite shades. That always looks cool when it goes on. Going on to the Dryad Bark areas, and that'll give them a nice dark shade in all those recesses. If you can hear any funky noises in the background, I've got Linnet 2 on my lap at the moment, and she is currently licking the microphone and my chin and purring away, so there might be a little bit of background noise. She's being adorable. Next is Citadel Seraphim Sepia. I'm going to use this on the leg wraps and the ropes that he's got tasseled around himself, also on all of those areas of bone as well. Now I'm going to use a little bit of Citadel Gore Grunter Fur, one of the contrasts. I'm going to use this for some of the leathery bits, so some of the straps, the little booties he's got on, get them a nice brown shaded. Love these, and then you can just put this on, get like the kind of base colour and shade, maybe a little bit of the highlight too, and then just add a few little details with a few different colours to really highlight them, so you can put like little scuffs and things like that on. But I do like the contrast for being able to put on like one layer and it does 2 layers worth of jobs. Next is going to be Citadel Snakebite Leather contrast. Going to do the same again, some of the other straps, so you're going to be using it on some of the straps holding his armour on and that kind of thing. I'm going to use a little bit of Citadel Wildwood contrast on his belt. Not too sure if there's any other straps remaining on, but you can basically use the Wildwood, the Snakebite leather, or the Gore-Grunter fur in any of the places that any of them are used, to be honest. They're all like pieces of leather, so any colours you can use for any part of those, I reckon. I'm going to use a little bit of Citadel Drakenhof Nightshade shade, and that is going to be to do all of the blue on him. Now, if you look at that piece of his shoulder there, to the left of the strap as you're looking at it, it's going to be his right shoulder. You can see like a little bit of knobbly stuff. A little bit later I paint that up with the Karak Stone again and do that in, I think, snakebite leather. I can't remember exactly what, but I'll point it out a little bit later in the video. But it's blue at this point in the thing, but I will end up doing that with a leathery colour. Now I'm going to do a little bit of Citadel Druchii Violet. I'm going to put that all over the purple on his keks. A little bit of Citadel Nuln Oil is going to be used to do the metallic bits on his knees, like his knee pads. That's going to be Citadel Fugan Orange. Going to use that to do his hair. I think this is the final shade. Give that a nice coat. Makes all the details on the head stand out. Now it's time for Vallejo White. We're going to do his eye first. First bit of colouring and detail that we're going to do. So you want to give his eye a nice smooth coat of white. Doesn't really matter which white you use, to be honest. It could be slightly off-white or pretty much any brand, as long as that's a nice consistent colour over the eye, it'll all be good. So you can see here that he's got his eye bit done. His iris is painted with the Fang Citadel, and that's just, you want to get that circular kind of shape, so it's just about clipping the top and the bottom there. Just touching that up to get it a bit smoother, but failed to press record. Next up, we're having Citadel Rust Grey. We're mixing a little bit of that with the Fang, and then we're going to do first highlight. Now, if you get a picture of an eye when you're doing this, and try and follow the kind of patterns that they do on the eye, that's quite fun to do. Now I'm going to add a little bit more Rust Grey to the previous mix to lighten that up. I'm going to do a few little highlights on those bits that you've just done. Finally, we're going to add some Vallejo White to the previous mix just to give that a final light effect. And we're just going to spot some of that around there to pick out some of those little iris parts that are lighter than the rest. And then we're going to use a little bit of Vallejo Black to paint on that pupil. And One thing I didn't do in this video is add a few little spots of white to the pupil, just to give that the kind of light reflecting off it. But you can do that if you want to. It makes it look pretty cool, like the similar kind of effects that you get on gemstones. Next we're going for Vallejo Red Wash. It's just to do a little bit of red around the edge of the eye. I'll probably do this a little bit later, to be honest, because I use the red wash to do kind of like the fingernails, toenails and the lips as well. But I was just doing the eye and enjoying doing the eye, so I added this now. We're now returning to Vallejo Flesh base. I'm going to reapply the colour to his skin. So when you're applying this, think about where the light is coming from. So I always do like the light's coming from top down. So try and create the shade underneath so that you're not getting the same colour like under his chin as you are on top of his chin, or the top of his head from the bottom of his head, that kind of thing. So that you will have those shadows creeping in there. It's a pretty quick and easy way to get it looking like there is some shade and proper lighting coming on there. Now we're going to add a little bit of Vallejo white to the flesh base just to lighten that up. I'm going to start doing a highlight again on the top edge. So you can see the areas that I'm picking out here to highlight those and get that lighter than the rest of it. When I add a little bit of white or a little bit of a colour to another colour, I don't tend to add a lot of it. It's just enough to lighten it that little bit so that when you paint it on you can see the difference in the colours. But it's never really an exact amount, it's more doing it by eye and just waiting for it that little bit lighter. Next we're going to add a little bit more Vallejo white to the mix and do another highlight on that. So when I did the first layer I was using a medium layer brush, and I'm still using a medium layer brush here. I think eventually I change over to a small layer brush, or possibly even the Army Painter Insane Detail brush, I think it is, just to do a few little bits by the eyes and things like that and pick out a few details. But generally I tend to use the medium layer brush. It gets a really good point and you can do pretty much everything with it. Working on the blue now, I'm going to go back to Citadel Macragge Blue. You can see he's looking a little bit shiny here, because he's quite big and he's rubbing against my hands and stuff like that. I did give him a blast with some Halford's matte lacquer, but I sprayed it a little bit too much because it's been a while since I varnished the figure and made him a bit shiny. But what we can do is once we finish painting it, give it a spray with that again, but a thinner spray, and that'll dull that back down again. So I did the lacquer just to help protect the miniature and stop it from scuffing, because you paint it and it's quite a large miniature, it'll rub on your hands and that kind of thing. Again, just picking out the ridges with the Macragge Blue there. And we're going to add a little bit of white to the Macragge Blue to start doing the highlights on that material. So again, here you want to be putting the lighter shade on the areas that are going to be catching the light, so the top edges and the top surfaces of all that material. I think I do end up highlighting that little kind of leather armour pad on his shoulder there as well. But you don't really have to do that because we're going to recolour that shortly anyway. Next I'm going to do a little more Vallejo white, do a final highlight on the blue material. This just picking out the edges and the details and that kind of thing to make them stand out a little bit more. I'm going to go back to the Rakarth Flesh, got quite a bit to do with this. So we're going to be doing those bone sections of the spear and the kind of bladed weapon in his other hand. Also going to do all those horns and spikes. And the same thing as with the materials in his face, you want to try and get the lighter edges at the top, or the lighter areas at the top, and the darker areas on the underside of stuff, So it's mainly going to get lighter on the top surfaces and the edges that are going to catch the light. You can use this on the wraps and stuff like that too, but we're going to highlight the wraps with different colours that we highlight the bone to. I'm going to add a little bit of Vallejo white to the Rakarth Flesh. I'm going to highlight the wraps on his legs here. Much like you did with the blue, you're just going to be highlighting those top edges and adding light to the areas that will be catching it. Going to add a little bit of white now, or a little bit more white I should say, to the previous mix, just to do a final highlight on those wraps. Now if you look, you can see that his kecks are painted there and loads more other bits have been painted on him. That's because I added this layer towards the end because I thought, you know what, it does need a little bit more of a highlight on there. It's just adding a little bit of a lighter colour to those wraps. Now to highlight the bone, we are going to use Citadel Ushabti Bone. I'm going to start adding that over the Rakarth Flesh. So the areas that you've added Rakarth Flesh to on the bone, you are going to be adding about this to about 50% of that area, like the top 50% of it, just to give that a nice little highlight. So you can see me going along the top edges there and trying to keep those details free of any paint. Now I'm going to do a final highlight on the bone with Citadel Screaming Skull. I'm just going to pick out all the details and the edges. So you'll have the ridge down the top edge, the areas where the bone is chipped, we'll be picking out those details too, the edges here on this little like ridge and all those little details on the bone too. Not sure why I did them as bone, I just thought they looked quite cool. Not sure where you get a bone that big from as well, maybe other giants or a whale or something like that, if you ignore the innuendo. Now I'm going to work on his loincloth and the one on his butt, and that is using Vallejo German Grey. We haven't actually done a wash or anything like that or reapplying the colour, it's just been straight black since it was painted on, so you can just use German Grey straight onto that. Again, like you've done with the other materials, painting the highlights on the raised areas and the areas that are going to be catching the light more. Finally, we're going to be using a little bit of Mechanicus Standard Grey to do the final highlight on these areas. As always as well, if you're painting it and you sort of like get to a certain point, there's a few bits on this where I painted it, like on his right buck cheek there, where the German Grey stops a bit suddenly. Once I'd finished painting this bit, I thought, you know, it doesn't look too hot that, so I went back and tweaked that a little bit. So if ever you do come across any bits that you've painted and you're thinking, not quite happy with that, it's no problem just to go back and tweak those and get them how you want them. Now it's on to Citadel Xerius Purple. I'm going to recolour his kecks. So like you did with the previous colours, on the cloth, you're just going to be highlighting the top edges and making those areas stand out, leaving the shade in the recesses and keeping those nice and dark. This will just bring that cloth to life. To highlight that, we're going to be using Citadel Genestealer Purple. Like we did the other ones, you're going to be using this on about 50% of the area that you just used Xerius Purple on, as this will give it that nice highlight, show the light catching the ridges on the material. Final colour for his Kex is Citadel Lilac. Not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but this is just to do edge highlights and bring those details out a bit. If you want to, you can do a little bit of rough cross hatching, just doing some like scuff lines going 90 degrees to the ridges just to make it look like there is material there and it's catching the light. But that's not really necessary, depends how detailed you want to go into your miniatures. Next is a little bit of Citadel Tallarn Sand, and we're going to be doing this to the snakebite leather areas. You can see his shoulders now been painted with snakebite leather, like the armour padding or whatever. So we're going to use some Tallarn Sand just to pick out some details in the edges, like edge highlights on the snakebite leather. Also do some scuffs and some sort of like as though it's been cut or scarred when a blade's hit it or scratched against something. So we're going to do this on all the snakebite leather areas. Next we have a really quick layer, so I didn't bother speeding it up because it is very, very short. Just going to use a little bit of Citadel Iron Warriors to pick out the knee pads and the studs and that kind of thing on his armour bits. So just reapplying that. Obviously failed to press record on that moment. And we're going to use a little bit of Vallejo Model Air Chrome to do some highlights. Like you can use, there's a silvery colour from Citadel, is it Stormhost Silver or something like that? That can be used in the same way as the Model Air Chrome, but I do think the Model Air Chrome is really, really good because it's got loads of pigment, so it really does show off all those little nicks and the edges quite well. Next, Citadel XV88. Going to use this to do the rope and add the highlights to this rope. So I'm basically doing like the kind of top 50% of the rope where it'd be catching the light and leaving the underside and the recesses still shaded. Now I'm going to use a little bit of Citadel Jokero Orange, or however you want to say it. We're just going to do the highlights on his hair, get those details really standing out so you can see all the ridges and that kind of thing on it. Next I'm going to use a little bit of Citadel Dawn Yellow as a ridiculously bright initial colour for the patterns on the shell. It's quite rough and ready the way I'm doing the patterns on the shell here. It's just off a rough picture of a red-eared slider terrapin. Used to have one many, many years ago on. A little amphibious fellow. And copying the rough patterns of that to then alter and colour in a little bit so it's not quite as bright. So as you can see, it does look very bright there. So we'll tone that down in a little while. So we're going to use Citadel Dryad Bark and reapply that to the ridges on the shell. Now we're adding a little bit of Karak Stone to the Dryad Bark just to lighten that up. Taking care not to go onto any of that dawn yellow, just trying to get the ridges and make those highlights stand out so you can see a little bit more detail on that shell there. I'm going to add a little bit more Karak Stone just to do a final highlight to the shell. Now if you wanted to, you could use the same mixes to do the kind of armadillo shell beneath it, but I'm going to use a slightly different tone of brown just to break that up and make it look slightly less the same. But there's no harm in doing them both the same colour by any means. I'm going to use a little bit of Citadel Cassandora yellow. This is going to be to go over those yellow stripes, because the stripes are quite a yellow, if that makes sense. They are quite a deep colour. So what I'm going to be doing is using the Cassandora yellow to make them that kind of vivid yellow. Then we're going to dull that down with another shade. Now I'm going to use some Citadel Athonian Camo shade. I'm going to give the shell another little wash of that, mainly over the areas where you've got the yellow, but it doesn't matter too much if it goes into the other areas as well, because it does give it that kind of green colouring, like the green brown those shells tend to have. Next up, a little bit of Citadel Dryad Bark, and we're going to do this kind of armadillo shell on his forearm. Again, like you've just done with the turtle shell at the top there, you're just going to be picking out all the ridges, so you can like gently dry brush those across if you want to, or pick them out individually. I do a little bit of dry brushing on them, just save a bit of time. Again, keep the colours that you're applying onto the top surfaces so that the undersides are still dark. Now I'm going to add a little bit of Citadel Mournfang Brown to the mix, just to change that Dryad Bark into a slightly more orangey brown colour. We're going to use that as the highlight. And for a final highlight to the shell, we're going to add a little bit more Mournfang Brown to the previous mix, and just do one last little highlight over that one. I'll just change it so it's a slightly different brown to the one above. As you can see, the shades given that, like, you know, the green brown, and the one below is a deeper brown. Now I'm going to use Vallejo Red Wash. I'm going to use this just to add a little bit of tone to his lips and also the fingernails. So when you look at the fingernails, you want to have the red wash sort of towards the finger end rather than the fingertip end, and that will just give it that little look. If you look at your fingernails, always like a little darker patch there, or there is on mine anyway. Hopefully that's not something fatal and everyone's the same, but that is how I apply that to his nails. Final thing we're going to do is add a little bit of a Grax Earthshade. I'm just going to use that to add a little bit of discoloration to the metals around his knees. Nothing too much there. You can use a bit of Seraphim Sepia on there as well if you want to, just to add a little bit of a rust colour, but I want them to look quite smart and shiny, just to stand out against the rest of the mini. And that is the finished Cyclops. Really pleased with how he turned out there. It's a cracking miniature, really great details, and does blow my mind a bit that it's 3D printed. But that is probably just an old thing where I find the technology mad. Thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and if you have, please give us a thumbs up, like and subscribe to the channel, and also leave a comment if you can, as it does help with the algorithms and all that kind of stuff. And I'll see you at the next video. Thanks very much. Take care.